Welcome to the Protego Foundation Book Club. I am Ali, the Finance and Development Director at the Protego Foundation. Today we're going to be discussing the sixth book in the Harry Potter series, The Half-Blood Prince. And next month, I believe August 25th, we'll do a part 2 of discussing Half-Blood. And welcome to everybody. Welcome back to people who have done this before, and welcome to new folks and people tuning in on YouTube for the first time. We're really excited to be here. Okay, so let's get started. I asked before we got started, anybody in the comments to talk about or to mention any creatures that they were particularly interested in discussing, and we got a couple answers: pygmy puffs, witherwings, return, so and then Aragog. Catherine, did you want to dive into any of that, or do you want me to talk about pygmy puffs or?
Yeah, sure. Well, yeah, I'm kind of going a little bit chronologically through my notes. So those were just the first things that like popped up in my notes. But yeah, so the pygmy puffs I think are a big one because, I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think this is the first time we see them, right? Because they're at Fred and George's Wizarding Wheezes shop. And actually, yeah, they come up pretty often because of Ginny having obtained one to take with her to Hogwarts. So I guess either like they updated the pets rule or she just kind of snuck one in there. But yeah, it's interesting to me that like, first of all, Fred and George would like sell them in their shop because like technically it's a joke shop and like it has nothing really to do with animals. But then I thought back to how much Fred and George were like very into like testing their products on animals and stuff like that, or like using, like, for instance, like doxy venom to create their skiving snack boxes. So I guess it's like not surprising from them. And it's like, to me it's I'm of two minds because like obviously they're very cute, but also like they're the byproduct of like some sort of nefarious like breeding practices, I guess. Which is kind of where Tyler got the idea of doing like the Pygmy Puff campaign from, because it's kind of similar to like how in the real world, like a lot of dogs and cats are like bred in really awful circumstances, which is why we encourage people to adopt, not shop for pets. Anyways, sorry, that was a ramble. But Allie, did you have any further thoughts on the Pygmy Puffs?
No, I think that covered it well. I think it was an astute observation that, it's kind of odd that Fred and George are selling them in their shop, but at the same time, they don't seem to have a lot of awareness or respect for animals in a way. Not to Fred and George bash, that's not why we're here, but I just think that they haven't quite gotten there in their their thinking. They don't really think too much about the animals that they serve, have in their lives. So it's kind of like they see them as a commodity or as, something that they can, I mean, a lot of people see their pets or their companion animals as, we call ourselves owners of animals a lot of times. And it's sort of a possessive thing, or like the way that, we talked about Hagrid in the past, seeing his creatures as possessions sort of, or even like Slughorn, different, but like Slughorn with his students as kind of possessions, I guess. And it's just sort of this this hierarchy or this dominant speciesist sort of view on things. And I think that fits in really well with, or it lines up with how Fred and George treat animals, and specifically selling these, cute little fluffy commodities like you see, at different shops, around, I mean, anywhere you might see, or for instance, like I went to Myrtle Beach a few months ago with my mom, and every time we drove past like a beachy shop and it said live, hermit crabs here. And it was just like, these hermit crabs are being sold next to keychains. And it's just like these are, they're not the same. You can buy like, oh, sunscreen and flip-flops and a hermit crab. And it's just like, that doesn't quite seem right. So, at Fred and George's, you buy love potions, which are also very problematic, but we don't have to get into that now. You can buy, extendable ears and like the boxing telescope things, and also this like living creature. And it's just, I think we see that you know, in the non-magical world as well. So that's a really good point. Does anyone want to chime in on pygmy puff stuff before we scoot on?
I just kind of dropped this in the chat. Oh, sorry, other Nicole, you go ahead.
So I was just going to say, because there's also like the other thing with the fact that pygmy puffs, their whole existence might actually be possibly illegal, because of the fact like there are the rules against like breeding, and they're sort of like a special bred version of a puffskin, but little and they're all like pink and purple. So it's like either these are animals that like actually a lot like the hermit crabs, they are animals that you're presenting as something entirely different than what they are, which at that point, like, how are they tiny? Like, did you illegally breed them tiny, or like did you like magic them tiny? And if you magicked them tiny, are they okay? Like, because I know, or even if you bred them tiny, are they okay? Like with dogs, like a lot of the dogs that were bred tiny have a lot of health problems. And like, do these things have health problems that like full-sized ones don't? What does being pink mean? Like that sort of thing. So it's sort of like the ethics of just like their whole existence beyond being sold as a commodity.
Definitely. Yeah, there's a lot of that. I mean, and we can talk about, you know, in the muggle world, the non-magical world, there are certain animals that are bred specifically like for their size. Like chihuahuas, I have a chihuahua. My mom has a chihuahua at home. And like as much as I love her most of the time, she's feisty. I do love her. She shouldn't be here, you know, and it's kind of as animal people, as you know, in the vegan world and just animal rescue and everything, to like look at an animal and think like, you know, you shouldn't be here. It's kind of, there's like a lot of I don't know, it's a tough conversation to have, because as much as, you know, there's certain animals that shouldn't be bred for the purpose of humans, and that's what a lot of animals have been. Like looking at chickens in factory farms and like cows, I mean, in any kind of industrial or like just agriculture, not just factory farms, but these animals have been bred specifically to be here, and it's not it's not natural, so to speak. These animals are natural, you know, or maybe like their ancestors were at some point, but the way that we've sort of like chickens aren't supposed to be the size that they are. They're supposed to be, oh, Jack is leaving. Bye, Jack. Good night. They're supposed to weigh like 3 pounds versus like the 12 that they might weigh, because you know, and it's not just that they're pumped full with antibiotics. It's just that they've been bred for so long that that's just the way that they're bred now. And the same thing, like maybe pygmy, or these, you know, pygmy pups aren't supposed to be pink, but pink ones sold better than brown ones. And so they were like, let's, you know, let's only breed the pink ones, or the pink and the purple, or like, you know, and try to make them exactly what we as humans want them to be, whether we're muggles or or wizards or wizarding people, or yeah. So that's a really good point.
I actually wanted to like also say that like the idea of like miniature puffskeins or puffskines, or however you pronounce that, like reminds me of the teacup pig industry, where I feel like it's mostly online sellers. Like they so-called like breed these like teeny tiny pigs, and then people are like, oh, they're so cute, they're so tiny, like they'll fit in my apartment. And then like later on realize these were just piglets, like they're not actually like really tiny pigs. And so then these people will have these very large pigs that shouldn't be in a small space. And then like it's like, okay, what do I do with this? And a lot of them, you know, end up like having to go to sanctuaries and stuff like that, which is great for them because yay, now they're in a sanctuary. But like people don't realize that the idea of like miniature animals in some circumstances is like a false advertisement. And like they're like in love with this idea of like, oh, tiny cute animal, without like recognizing that maybe that's not like the best thing for the animal, or like maybe that's like a lie, and like people are trying to use an animal's size to like sell them. Like, do we know if these puffskeins ever like grow up to be bigger than they are right now. Like, I mean, obviously that isn't covered in the books, but it kind of reminded me of that whole issue.
Well, they do now sell a giant version at the Wizarding World, so maybe they have like ones that are this big.
Hey, at least those are not real, actual
Yeah.
live animals. They're like a little stuffy. So
I do think they're like the most sold item in Weasley's Wizard Wheezes, though, in the Muggle, well, in our Wizarding World, but I don't think they would be in the real Wizarding World in the books. Because like all that stuff is cool, like the extendable ears and everything, like that's useful, but
yeah,
I don't know.
that's what I would go for.
One at Universal is kind of like, eh.
Good points. And then Nicole said in the comments, do we know if the ministry's Department of Regulation oversees distribution of domestic creatures? Feeling inspired by NYC slamming the hammer on pet shops and wonder if a similar policy is in the magical world. Good question. I know Tyler has a lot of ideas about the wizarding, like control of magical creatures and kind of like reforming that department and everything. And I don't know. Do you have thoughts on that? Like what you would like to see?
It's interesting too, because I think we've talked about like the whole then versus now and how culturally we've advanced our relationship with magical creatures or non-magical creatures. But again, the fact that this legislation only took place in New York now, when we've been banging on their doors for literally 20 years trying to make this policy a thing. But looking at the magical world in the 90s too, I mean, we see things like ELOPs and other magical menageries. And of course, like I think the expectation then for animal companions is that that's the go-to. And then you see a place like a joke shop, which we kind of talked about before, but then you see a place like a joke shop, A, crossbreeding, B, adhering to cruelty practices with other magical creatures, and C, distributing them. I don't know, it just makes me think that the Department of Magical Creature Regulation doesn't offer much regulation at all, unless it involves the teachers at Hogwarts.
Yeah, definitely. I think that any big like organizational change is going to take a long time. And I think we've seen just even small things like in the wizarding world, like not using like pens. I know that's a really weird example, but I just feel like there's so many things where the wizarding world seems like they are very behind the times. And I don't know if that would transfer over to also like legislation and like looking through everything. I'm reading this like really long fanfic right now. It's like a Marauders era, and it's like from Remus's point of view, and so it goes into a lot of like werewolf legislation and like the werewolf tracking and just like dark creature tracking, and it's just interesting to kind of see like the politics behind it, because this fic spans from like the time when the Marauders like first start in like 71 or something, 70, I forget, 73, something like that, all the way through, like from the first Wizarding War to like the second, and just to kind of like see the political discussions, I think is interesting, because I think that also a lot of that like organizational and like systemic change happens kind of in sort of in movements, like it comes along with like nothing is like in a bubble. And I think that a lot of change happens when other things are also changing. And so we might see more change for animals around like the wartime in the wizarding world, which might seem like odd, but when everything is heightened, we might see more of that. Like now we might see more organizational change for animals because of, the idea of total liberation and like, racial inequality, and just kind of like no one is free until everyone is free. And so we'll see a lot of like people for animal rights, and then we'll see a lot of pushback also because they're, So I think that it's just interesting to look at from a political perspective, and sort of like you said, Nicole, we see it sort of, it depends on, back then and then now, and just how it would be different, both because we've advanced so much, and then also because of like political climates of whatever time period we're talking about.
Really quick on that, because I'm very fascinated, but well, first of all, of the role that werewolves can play here, because we talked about this in I think it was the Goblet of Fire book club, where Hermione had a quick exchange where she was like, well, I'm not speciesist because my professor's a werewolf. And we even see it too, I think it was in the last book too, when Arthur was in St. Mungo's and he was sharing a suite with a werewolf too, and he was like, hey, yeah, this is my new buddy, he's a werewolf. And obviously the Weasleys have such open minds and such big hearts, so of course, like, they didn't react the way most other wizards would react to a werewolf. But it's kind of interesting to think of the role that werewolves could play in the interspecies partnerships between humans or wizards and magical creatures too. So I'm glad you brought that up too. I'm very fascinated by like them being a beacon for change.
Yeah, I think that kind of, I think it's even mentioned because with like Hagrid being half giant and sort of like half breed, and like that term might not be seen, you know, it might be like a slur or something in the wizarding world. And there are plenty of words like that, you know, in our language that are used to put other people down and to, you know, separate and other different communities and marginalized groups. But I think that kind of like how we've talked about how Hermione's activism wasn't necessarily she did well for a 14-year-old, I think, but there's, you know, she could have done better. And we talked about that in past meetings. But I think that, for instance, you know, we've said involving the elves who work in houses, like, or elves who live in houses in that activism, and like asking like, what do you want? I think that like with them, because they are able to tell us, like, we can't really talk to a dog or a cat or even like a pygmy puff if we're talking about these magical creatures and say, what do you want? Like, we can make decisions based on what we think is best for them. But with creatures like werewolves, or, you know, half giants, or, you know, I don't know, like, I think that's an important distinction. And like you said, kind of using them as, I mean, if they want to, obviously, because it shouldn't, not all the work should be put on those groups either, to like change, because it's the rest of the world that has to change, not necessarily them. But kind of using that as a sort of, yeah, that's important. So werewolves, that kind of like half human, half wizard, half, you know, creature. Let's see. I'm just reading through the comments now. Yeah. So yeah, Hermione. We could have a whole book club discussion one day just about Hermione and everything. I mean, I know that we've discussed in Protego Cast, and I'm sure she'll come up again in next season, which drops September 1st. So keep an eye out for that. But yeah, good questions. Let's see, I'm looking through the chat if there's anything else. Did anyone else have any questions before anything?
So kind of going back to the pygmy puffs, to me, they seem kind of like designer dogs. Like, I don't know, the people who have like little Pomeranians because they're fluffy and they're like purses and stuff. But I've been thinking about this a lot lately. Like, I love corgis. And I know a lot of people do, and a lot of people breed corgis because everyone wants one. So I'm in like a corgi group, and I'm always seeing all these new little puppies, and it's like, on one hand, I'm like, of course they're so cute and everything, but then you're just thinking about all of these dogs being bred when there are all of the other dogs in the shelters. And so it's kind of like a conflict in my brain. I'm like, I really love them because they're adorable, but maybe I shouldn't love them. And I don't know, like, does anyone have any thoughts about that sort of thing?
Yeah, I think there's so many animals, you know, I'll see like a video of a monkey on TV and be like, oh, I want a monkey. But like, obviously I don't actually want a monkey in my apartment because that's not where monkeys should be, you know? And so I think that we all have these, like, we love animals, but because we take it one step further than, you know, people who love animals as the commodity or like the treasure or something to keep or control, we take it that next step, you know, as we are animal lovers and in animal rights and stuff, that we also respect the animals for their autonomy, or like as much autonomy that we can give them. I don't know if that answers like your corgi question, but obviously there are animals that I would love to hang out with and like see and go into like their natural habitats and like be with them. But also me going there disrupts what makes it their habitat, you know? And so it's kind of like, I do feel conflicted because on the one hand, I want to immerse myself with all these animals. And again, like I would love to hold a monkey. Like my college dorm was decked out in like pictures of great apes. And so apes and monkeys and just primates, I was like obsessed with them. And I just wanted to work with them and like be with them. But then a lot of that comes with exploitation too. And so the same way that a lot of people go to zoos because they love animals, right? Because they want to be near animals. But then when you think about it, this is not how we should love animals. And it's just different. So like you love corgis, but you also understand that, you know, it might not be natural for there to be purebred corgis. And there might be, I don't know, that didn't answer, but those are thoughts that I have.
No, yeah. Yeah. And for me, like, I felt like I was finding a workaround because I adopted a corgi from like a corgi rescue once, but they have like a waiting list, you know, like everyone's like, I also now have a dachshund that I got from a dachshund specific rescue, but I just don't know. I feel like that was a selfish thing to do almost because that dog was going to get adopted either way. And I feel like if I just went to a shelter and like found a dog who had maybe a day left before his time was up, that would be a better thing to do. So
I get that. I think it's also important I always talk about, because I work in animal rights outside of Protego also. And a lot of times I feel like, you know, and I don't know if, you know, everyone here is vegan or plant-based or vegetarian or just really loves Harry Potter and animals, which is any of those are awesome. But I think that a lot of times when we do something good, we kind of check off a box and we're like, okay, I did like my good thing. Like I'm vegan. So like if I use a straw at this restaurant, or if I like don't take my own like reusable container and then I get this like styrofoam, and it's like, okay, it's not as bad because, you know, I did this one thing. And I think that a lot of times that can be a sort of dangerous game, but we also have to give ourselves credit for what we do. And like your corgi, your dachshund are like very, very loved. And not to say that they wouldn't have been loved in another house or gotten adopted, but you still did a good thing by adopting. So I don't think it's like healthy for us to berate ourselves on stuff like that. I wanted to use this as an opportunity to show my dog Slinky. She passed away a couple years ago, but she was a corgi dachshund beagle something mix.
did you say her name was Slinky?
Slinky, yeah.
Oh my gosh.
Well, her birth name was Samantha, but she wasn't called Samantha after like the first day in our house. We were like, nah, she's Slinky. So we had her for almost 16 years. She was 16 and a half when she passed away, and we got her when she was a little under a year. But yeah, that's my corgi contribution. And my dad is obsessed with corgis. He went from like Pomeranians to corgis, and he just loves little dogs, and it's so funny. But anyway, yeah.
Yeah, but I think you're right. It's all about like, you can't do everything at once. And maybe the next dog that I adopt won't be a specific breed dog. They'll just be from maybe a pit bull, or, you know, ones that are more in need. So
yeah, that's always something I recommend too for people. Like I have a friend who his parents didn't want them to get a dog because of like allergies. I don't know, but anyway, but he wanted like a hypoallergenic dog or something, you know, like those like bred to be. But there are also, and so I suggested, why don't you look on, you know, there's Pet Finder, there's, you know, even like, I mean, it depends on Craigslist, but you can get like some information from there and then look if they're, you know, a reputable shelter, or if it's, you know, kind of a sketchy breeder situation. But like there are, like you said, Valerie, like breed specific rescues. And so if someone's like, oh, I just really want, you know, for instance, a French bulldog, who they have a lot of health problems because they're specifically bred. But then a lot of times people will adopt a French bulldog, realize how much money it costs because they have a lot of health problems, and then abandon them, and then like give them to a shelter. And so there are these pure-blooded animals, like these creatures looking for homes. And I think that, you know, while, you know, the same way that like I have my 3 hermit crabs, and like they shouldn't be in a tank, they should be in, you know, their natural jungle, wild habitat, beachy place. But like, I'm not just going to be like, okay, well, be free, you know, we shouldn't have you. Like, they're domesticated already. Like, these animals, we can work in this like higher systemic change to like change legislation and change laws and change, you know, hearts and everything. But like, that's going to take a long time. And in the meantime, your dachshund needed a home, you know, your corgi needed a home, you know, so the hermit crabs need a home. So yeah, so it's kind of like it's not black and white. Like it's there's a lot of kind of ethical gymnastics I think you have to do with a lot of these things, but these are good conversations to be had. So
yeah, and you brought up like a really good point by talking about the corgis specifically, because I think out of all dog breeds, they're the most like commodified, at least around social media. Like I'm pretty sure there are people who've gotten corgis just so that they could like be on social media and have a following and like do all these cute corgi things and corgi days. And I'm like, that's not why you have a dog. That's not why you rescue one. That's not why you know, bring one into your family. So yeah, I think like designer dogs are definitely also a very like apt comparison or like parallel with the pygmy puff issue for sure.
So that's interesting. How does everybody feel? I think I know the answer, but in those situations where well, okay, I'm gonna be honest. There's one corgi that I do follow. His person makes really adorable videos. And then probably everyone's heard of who's that dachshund? Crusoe. And they like make these little like cute skits with them, and I'm sure that those dogs have a wonderful life and they're taken well care of, but they are being used to make money at like actors, and I don't know, maybe they want to be doing that, maybe they don't. So in those situations, I mean, it's not like it's on a like actual film set or anything, but
yeah, that's tough. I mean, I actually found myself on some thread the other day reading, because there was a YouTube channel for this like unboxing that this little boy, he's probably like 7 or 8, does, and like people were like, you know, his parents are exploiting him by making him like do this, and like I'm like, he's also getting all these toys, and like I don't know, like it's just kind of like a hard, like, does he want to be doing it? I don't know, and it's kind of hard to say. I mean, with a human, it's a little easier because you can like ask them, you know, and kind of, I mean, with animals, like your dogs, you can like tell if they want to be making a video or not, probably. Like if I try to like film my roommate's cat and she just looks at me and like walks away, I'm like, okay, like not today, I get it. Yeah. You know? But I think that it's not, like you said, it's not on the level of like the entertainment industry where these animals are being, you know, taken from their homes to be put in this loud set with these lights and these strange smells and people they don't know if it's just, you know, cutesy in their apartment or in their house or something, and they get extra treats, you know. Right. Who's to say? Like it's kind of, it's a I'm not sure. And I had another point, but I think I lost it. So if anyone else wants to jump in while I think about that.
Just another one that I thought of was, there's like, I don't know what the name of the account is, but there's a hedgehog I keep seeing pop up, and it's like someone's holding the hedgehog and he's looking all cute, but they keep taking the hedgehog to like all of these epic like locations and everything. And it's a great photo, but I don't assume that the hedgehog wants to be there doing that.
Yeah, that actually can be like quite dangerous if you take like a small animal like that out into, like, for instance, if they were taking them like on a mountain or to a forest, because like then they sort of are at risk of becoming a prey animal.
Especially when you're like holding them out for a photo.
Yeah. That's always risky. And then there's like, I mean, there are all kinds of like animals in wild areas that could, you know, transmit a disease to them or bite them or like, you know, so that I guess like for me with the whole like social media animal thing, it's like, it's, if it's just sort of like incidental, like that you're finding like social media fame with your pet or your companion animal or whatever, like that's cool. I think my issue is like when people like get an animal specifically and like plan it out that they're going to be, doing all these things just for like cute videos. Cause then it becomes more about the human and less about the animal that they're like showcasing, I guess.
Definitely. Yeah, I've seen some things just for some reason I'm thinking more about like human examples where parents, their Instagrams they'll have thousands of followers and it'll be because their kid is cute or their kid does this or whatever. And then they say, the second that my child says, I don't want to do this, like I'm done, and like, this is not I'm not trying to exploit, but this is something that we do as a family, we do for fun, together. And I think that makes sense. And then I had like two more quick things about that. And then I wanted to talk about Monica's comment, because that's a really good comment. But it made me, sorry.
Oh, I was just saying Ryan had a very good comment that you might want to share as well.
Okay, cool. I just saw that too. So that kind of made me think about sanctuaries, and I might have mentioned this in another book club, so I'll try to be brief. You know me. So sanctuaries, there's a difference between like a sanctuary and a zoo, and the main difference is that the animals are not supposed to be used like as, they're not exploited and they're not meant to be anywhere at a certain time and be shown off in a certain location for a certain, group. And it's not a petting zoo where you go and you feed the cows and stuff. Sometimes there are tours where, the cows are out in the field, and then like if it happens to be feeding time, then you can get a treat and then they might come up to you. But like where I used to work, the big thing was that, if the goats were in the goat barn and a tour came and somebody was like, I came here, I drove 10 hours to be here, I just really want to meet Tuesday the goat, but Tuesday the goat is taking a nap in the barn, nobody's going to wake him up and be like, somebody's here for you, like this is his home. And like if he doesn't want to come out, it sucks for the human, but like this, we're not like parading these animals around. This is their home. And if they happen to come up because they want to hang out with people, that's one thing, but we're not going to force anybody. Also the idea of like the hedgehogs, or that hedgehog being like taken to different places, made me think of, we've talked in our animal adoption program, we've listed a couple rescues, bird rescues and wild animal rescues and stuff. And we've been really careful to make sure that any rescue or sanctuary that we talk about is one that doesn't take their animals like off site to do education programs. Because like as much as education programs can be good so people can get to know animals, it also comes, with that dangerous line of using that animal as like a prop, and that's not what we want to do to them, because they are, they should be living at their rescue and at their home and just doing whatever they want to do and not being shown like, hey, here's a free animal. And like, is that animal really rescued if they're being paraded around and like shown? But I mean, some orgs can do that better than others, but again, it's just a dangerous game, I think. So it's better to have like a hard line, no, and then go from there. But Monica's comment, I think The Good Place has come up in probably half of the book clubs that we've had, because whenever we start to talk about the whole like do as much good as we can, and then it's really hard to do good sometimes because you buy a tomato from a garden, but then like I don't know, like there's this whole long line, this like pipeline of like what like the original seed, where that seed came from, and then like how it's handled, and like a driver, and then like the tomato might not be exploited, but maybe like there were pesticides that like killed animal like bugs there, and then like mice in the field, and then a human had to pick them, and then the gas used in the van to transport them, and it's just this long line of things where it's like really, really hard to do everything in that like green plus. If you're not familiar with The Good Place, there's this scene where like every little thing that this, any person does, and it's like read a book about space and it's just like neutral or whatever, or it's like, called somebody a bad name and it's like red negative letter or numbers. And then it's like, gave someone flowers and it might be like a plus, but then you like cut those flowers and it's a negative. And it's just kind of like every little thing has a danger there, I guess. And then the whole effective altruism thing where it's like being the most effective possible, like the biggest number. So there are organizations that they're a little bit more welfareist, where they're looking at, making cages bigger for animals so that the millions of animals that are in cages will have a better life, while sanctuaries are more usually abolitionist, because they're like, the whole point is to not have any animals in cages. But is the sanctuary that's saving 400 animals doing better than the 400 animals living in as close to freedom as they can with no cages, no nothing, more autonomy? Is that better than the millions of animals who get like 4 extra inches and are a little bit happier in their, their cages and stuff? And it's just, I'm not answering that question, and I'm not going to get into that here because that's a whole other conversation. And if you're interested in that, you can look up effective altruism, and there's some interesting points there, but jury's still out on all of that. But yeah, so Monica said from, shrimp rights, insects, and then the magical world, cockroaches and cockroach clusters. But then at the same time, dragons need sanctuary, and, pygmy puffs maybe need to be liberated so they're not sold as commodities at joke shops. And there's so much, and not everybody can do everything, and not everything can happen at once. So it's important to do as much as we can when we can, and just go from there, I think. And then Ryan's comment. So yeah. And there's so many animals like who are these like designer dogs, I guess, but they're rescued, and they still can be rescued. Even though they sell for, like Ryan said, like $2,500 or something. And the adoption fee was $40. So there's animals out there who need homes. And so Ryan says to uses her story to bring awareness to others that don't understand how breeders think and operate. And then having a leash that says adopt all up and down it. So like you can use, and I say use your animal, that was going to sound not right, but like you can use the fact that you have your animal, and kind of like, I have 3 hermit crabs, and I don't just, I talk to people about them. I talk to pet stores. I like, post stories about them. I bought my mom a ticket to CrabCon, this virtual crab festival, and she went. It was like 3 days long, and she was live texting me for like 72 hours, like, look at this crab. And she was so excited because the crabs are at her house right now. So I had them in a 40-gallon tank, just 2 of them, the boys, Gregory and Draco. And then I went home for during quarantine, and then my mom upgraded them to a 130-gallon tank. And I'm like, Mom, that doesn't fit in my apartment. So like I have to figure something else out, because they're like living the life right now. I even have a webcam that she set up that I can like watch them live from my phone. So anyway, we do what we can. And yes, and then Nicole said, when we all move to Scotland, which is the plan, if anyone's new to that plan, you're welcome to join. We'll open a dragon and hippogriff rehab / sanctuary. So 100%. Did anyone I just talked for a long time, anything about that, about designer animals or / vegan bed and breakfast for sure. And turkey sanctuary, and we'll get Truco treats in for like a chocolate shop in there, and chocolate making classes and all that fun stuff. Yeah. Nicole, I saw you have a friend there. Who's that with you? Yeah, Nicole Herring. Sorry, there's 3.
There's
Nicole.
2.
I don't know. There's 2.
We've got 2. This
Okay.
is Loki and Sally. They're very loud tonight.
So cute. Cool. Okay, so that was a lot of things. Does anyone want to talk about Aragog? Any specific thoughts on poor Aragog from this from Half-Blood? I mean, I know that's like my favorite scene in like all of the movies, like Harry with the pincers. But yeah, Catherine, go ahead.
Yeah, so the reason I wanted to talk about Aragog, aside from the fact that I think it's lovely that Hagrid, in his sort of like misinformed way, loves these creatures that everyone else does not. I thought it was just so horrible when Slughorn was like, here's this beloved creature companion, and let's just go and harvest things from it for money. I was just like, ugh, it made me squirm. Like, I hated that. And I know that's supposed to like clue us into like who Slughorn is as a character, but it just, the fact that he got away with doing it and Hagrid was like didn't know about it, I hated that.
Yeah, it was not, I mean, I say that's like my favorite scene, but it's also not a good scene for, Acromantula and for the animal rights community in general. But yeah, it's again that sort of commodity, like using animals for their parts. And it's just like, as soon as this creature that Hagrid, he raised him from a wee spider, and had him, and Aragog had a wife and a family, and right, Mosag, was that Aragog's wife? And and like a family and like all these children and everything. And then it's just like, oh, like and doesn't Slughorn call him like great beast? And like anytime someone, I don't know, I just feel like but it wasn't like with I'll say that to like my crabs or like my dogs or something, and just say like something silly like, oh, I don't know. But this was not like a term of endearment. It was like, I don't know, it just seemed like disrespectful and kind of undermining the fact that this was a whole person. The spider Aragog was a whole person with his, what he wanted to do, what he didn't want to do. Like he was, I'm distracted by the dogs playing in the,
and it's also like, even actually, now that I think about it, like even Hagrid bringing Aragog's body out of the forest, we don't know if that's what Aragog wanted.
Yeah.
And because like, I mean, I think I recall Hagrid mentioning something like, oh, his children would have like eaten his body or something like that. And like, that's what's natural for them. So like, why did you take that decision away from him?
Yeah, that's again, like showing or thinking that we know everything. We know what's right for other creatures, or like I keep going back to Hermione, and I'm not bashing on Hermione. She's a very good character and, learned a lot and everything, but like she thought she knew what was best for the elves and she just ran with it, right? Hagrid thinks he knows what's best for Aragog because he was friends with him. But at the same time, like we don't know, we do as much as we can for animals, and we do what we think was best for them. But at the same time, we definitely push our agenda on them a lot of times, and we do it's not always what we think is best for them. It's what we think will seem best for them in like the eyes of others. Also, I think a lot of times like we have ideas of what is best, like what other people will think, and we don't always think about the animal. And then I'm just looking at Monica's comment. I've often thought about how Hagrid has decided what he thinks is best. He loves animals, but a lot of his actions are self-serving, 100%.
Yeah.
And it's possible to love animals and harm them and still speciesist. Yeah. And a lot of, I mean, even in, animal rights and animal, protectionism, the animal protection movement, we're still being speciesist, like by feeding cats, chickens and turkeys and fish. And like, we still make these decisions based on, what is best for us. Like I would, I'm not gonna she's not my roommate's cat. I'm not gonna be like, all right, Taki, like you can go because I want to save this chicken that you would be eating, in your Shiva or whatever. Like we make decisions based on what's best for us. And I think that a lot of, like Monica said, you said it perfectly. A lot of his actions are self-serving. Yeah. And I had another thought about that scene. Oh, and we can get back to Aragog. Did anyone have anything else about Aragog before? We can come back to that. But the fish in the story also, when Slughorn's like, it's like probably actually that's my favorite scene in Half-Blood is my favorite book and movie for anybody. Like this book club could be like 10 hours long and I would be fine with that. Well, maybe not because of my cough. But Slughorn says, like, I once had a fish, and then he like pauses, and I really wanted him to like end it there, and then he kept going, and it was just like a really funny scene. But he talks about this fish that a student gave him, and we later find out that Lily gave him this fish, and because it was a bowl of water with a lily in it, right? And then the lily transformed into a fish, and then, right? Or the other way around. Yeah. And then when Lily died, the fish disappeared. And it's like, where did they go? Like, was that fish? I mean, that's a whole topic on sentience and transfiguration, and a lot of, topics that we've discussed before, whether or not animals, if they start as a flower and turn into a fish and then disappear, do they have the sentience of a flower, which is to say not as much, or do they then acquire the sentience of a fish and then that life is taken from them? So that was a thought I had. If anyone wants to weigh in or go back to the Aragog stuff, plenty to talk about.
Actually, that just made me think of, so like when the fish died because Lily died, some, like, I've heard of this happening like on very rare occasions, and maybe it's outlawed in a lot of states now, but some people would like have their pets euthanized once they passed away. Like they'd have it in their will to do that. I'm pretty sure it's like banned now, but like just the fact that like people would do that, it reminded me of that. Like I was just like, oh, I mean, it's very sad that like in this case, it wasn't like, intentional. Like she didn't, put thought into it that like, oh, when I die, that means this fish is going to die. It was kind of just like it happened. But like it just, for some reason, it reminded me of that. Or like how people maybe don't make plans for their companion animals for after they pass away. Because that's how some animals end up in shelters too, is because they weren't like kind of given a direction of where to put this animal, like after its owners, or not owner, after the person who's like had this animal has like passed away.
Yeah, that happens a lot in shelters where these animals are wanted. A lot of times when owners will, or owner, not owner, but guardians, or the people who have these animals in their homes, then pass away, then it's not like, we make decisions about where money is going to go, where assets are going to go, if they have children, where children are going to go, but animals aren't always thought of. So that happens. I don't know how often, but that's definitely one of the reasons why animals come into shelters. And it's really hard for the animal, because not only did they lose their person, but now they're in this whole new environment, and yeah, it's just not great. But the lily thing, I guess, because it was probably just like obviously it was a spell, but probably not, I would say not. Well, again, I don't know about the sentience of the animal, of the fish, but like the magic died with Lily, and I guess that just meant that the fish disappeared. So in my mind, I'm hoping it was just kind of like a holographic sort of, or like the magical equivalent of a non-magical holograph sort of in a bowl, that just kind of like fizzled out, or like the fireworks dragons at like the end of Order of the Phoenix or something, like that they're just fireworks, just something like not real. And then let's see. Monica asked about the sentience of people in pictures in the magical world.
I feel like I might need to clarify a little bit, because the connection probably isn't making sense. As we're talking about this lily, I was becoming really concerned about this fish that was in a container. And of course, I'm worried about the fish not getting to experience its full life. But then I'm wondering, is that fish inherently a flower? Just like if you turn a spoon or something into a mouse, is that mouse inherently a spoon? Is that sentience different in the magical world? Because I just have found it so fascinating that there seems to be a difference between what moves and reacts. Like in the pictures, they're upset if you drop water on their nose, right? But it seems to still be very different from the way we think about sentience in this non-magical world.
Yeah, no, that's a good question. And we've discussed sentience a little bit, and we're gonna have a whole episode on that, and for Protego Cast too. So send in any of these questions, and I'll make a note to talk about this fish during that episode too. But I think that, I don't know, maybe because there are things in the non-magical world that move because we have spelled them to. So let's say like I'm thinking of like the hula dancers that go in like the cars or something, or like they have those like solar powered lights with like the little flowers where they're like leaves bop up and down and it's solar powered, or like battery operated, or like a toy car. Like that's kind of, is that sort of us spelling it with like electricity and battery power and all of that? Could it be that this fish is just a flower that was reshaped and then spelled to move around like a fish and didn't really have the same idea? I mean, I hope so for the fish's sake. And the same thing, but then with the portraits, and again, like most people here, I mentioned fanfic like 10 times every book club, but like depending, there's some fics that really get into like the lore of the portraits and kind of where they have a lot more sentience, and like sometimes like the Snape portrait, the headmaster portrait will like have whole discussions and talk about the past and the future and everything, and sometimes it's just like Dumbledore just kind of like smiling and just kind of like almost like a you hear the sirens in Brooklyn, I think so, just kind of like a like a GIF or something where the portrait does the same thing over and over. But like again, we saw, you know, the portrait in front of Gryffindor, like she got scared, you know, for Sirius Black and like scratching, and then Sir Cadogan and all of his like, you know, fighting, and like these portraits have their own emotions and feelings. But is that just like brought in, like does the painter, you know, bestow that upon them? Like is there magical paint that gives them certain, like do they just react? This is making me think of like, now getting into, I think of the when Descartes writing about animals as machines and kind of saying like animals don't necessarily think, they just react. And obviously we don't agree with that. But is, you know, if we like touch a stove, do we have like a hot stove? Are we really thinking like, oh my gosh, like this is hot, therefore I shall move my hand? Or is it just like an immediate reaction? And so that's the kind of the idea of like, do all creatures, do all animals really have that reasoning, or is it just reactions to outside stimuli that cause them to do things? And so I don't know if the portraits, I don't know, those are some thoughts. Anybody on that? There's some more comments too. Yeah, and then Parth mentions well, a couple things here, but the one with the spell ending because the caster died, just like a body binding spell of Harry when Dumbledore died. Spoilers. Yeah. If anybody comes here not knowing what, it's literally in this book. So, and then for the fish, are they actually, you know, a fish, like with the whole lifespan of a fish and everything? And yeah, I wish Hogwarts had like, in some fics they have like a magical art class, and that's always cool. There's so much out there that we don't know. It's pretty cool. Oh, Catherine says that oh, your sister spoiled you on Dumbledore's death. Never forgiven. Yeah, I remember with Deathly Hallows, I like rushed to beat my brother in like reading it. My mom bought us 2 copies, and I told Dylan to give me like a 12-hour head start because he was a much bigger reader than I was at that age. And he didn't, and he finished before me and like didn't tell me, and it was this whole big thing. But anyway, but he would never spoil, or he'd know it would not be okay. But anywho, and then Parth also said earlier, can you conjure a powerful charm or magic to make a fish like animatronic or something? Like it might not be sentient. Yeah, so I guess that kind of goes back to the idea of, is this fish kind of like our equivalent of a toy car that you like, you know, those ones that you like pull backwards and they like wind forward. Like there's something that we did to them similar to like what a spell would do. So are they actually a sentient creature, or are they just kind of magicked to, you know, is this lily, this flower just magic to look different and act different, but not really any, like they're not actually like a person or like a sentient animal. And I hope, again, for the fish's sake, that is the case. Okay.
Especially because fish cannot survive in bowls.
No.
even though everyone thinks they can. They can, but they shouldn't.
No.
So don't.
Yes. Yes. I follow I'm gonna look it up. I think it's called, I say Friends of Philip or something. Friends of Philip Sanctuary, Fish Sanctuary. And they are an aquatic animal rescue in the San Francisco Bay Area. And they just post a lot of like mostly betta fish. They rescue them from like pet stores. They go there and ask, them to surrender like their sickest fish, and then they'll take them and put them in tanks with like adequate, everything. Because again, we don't want to support these industries and like buy animals to support the pet trade, but these animals still deserve to live. It's not their fault that they were bred into a world that's not, good for them, or not, or has the potential to be bad for them, I guess, depending on where they end up. So yeah, fish don't survive well in bowls. They
hear
need a lot.
people saying that a lot, what you just said, like, well, I rescued them by buying them from the pet store. No.
Yeah.
Yes, but it's that animal is going to be replaced with another animal. So really, you're just enabling another animal to need to be rescued.
Yeah, and that's so hard because I don't want to. At the same time, I'm not going to tell somebody like, you just supported animal agriculture, and like it's not that person who is contributing and like solely upholding animal agriculture and the pet trade. Like by you purchasing a fish to save them isn't like the make or break of the pet trade, unfortunately, or your decision to not buy them but ask for surrender is not the make or break of the pet trade. But it's all those like little actions that build up. And like my mom and I rescued a cow. We saw them on Craigslist a couple of years ago from this dairy farm. And because all the, the baby boy cows just get shipped off to the eel industry and just killed. But a lot of times it's cheaper for the farmers to kill them or to just like leave them there or give them away rather than like process them, which is a horrible word for that. And so we saw them, and the guy was asking for like $40 for this cow. And I was just like, we're here, we're saving you money. But it was like really hard. And I was like really trying to work with this farmer. And I know that me rescuing this cow and not giving him the $40 for this baby, he was so cute. He was like a Great Dane size. Like he fit in the back of my Kia Forte, and we drove him, and he was adorable. He is adorable. I mean, he's big boy now. He's like 3 years old at a sanctuary. His name is Dougie. But like by us rescuing him and not giving the money, I don't think it's not like, it didn't light up in the farmer's mind like, oh, wow, like, I'm going to change this into like a soy farm and like be vegan and all of that. But like, it was a small action that we took, that saved this cow and maybe made him think a little bit differently for at least a little while. And it saved, that's the kind of the idea of like effective altruism also versus, or not necessarily effective altruism, but welfare versus abolitionist. When you're looking at kind of, those are two sides, and there's more sides in the spectrum. It's not just those two, but you have, that was more abolitionist, I guess, like saving this one animal versus donating money for them to get bigger cages so that the cows that they have in their farms can live at least a little bit more comfortably. So it's kind of that idea of like one or many, few, or,
Yeah, what you just said, like, I don't think it should be one or the other because they both play very important roles. Like having animal sanctuaries that people can visit and get educated there and can go and pet a cow if the cow wants them to. It allows someone to like create a connection with the animals. So I think both are very important. And you did the right thing by saving little Dougie. But I know a lot of sanctuaries run into that a lot. Like sometimes they'll partner with farms, and the farms will let them know if they have like a baby animal that they want to just give them. But a lot of the time, these sanctuaries have to pay awful humans for these animals in order to save their lives. And then it's like the awful humans kind of getting a reward for what they've done.
Yeah,
But
there are a lot of there are a lot of different ways that sanctuaries acquire animals, I guess, or are given animals or get them. And a lot of times they do find them at like auctions and stuff. And a lot of times there'll be animals who are deemed, unfit, or they have, they were born with like a defect, I guess, or like their arm, crooked and they can't, whatever. But I think, lost what I was saying again. But yeah, I think there's not one way to do this. There's not one way there are better ways and there are worse ways, and there are some things that should be done and some things that shouldn't. But I think it's gonna, total liberation is gonna take, or even just, if we pick one thing, animal agriculture, it's gonna take a lot more than like one person's opinion or one. So I think it's just important to remember to kind of diversify the information that you're getting, and to look at all different directions and look at, all different organizations, some that are, again, totally abolitionist, some that are like welfarists, some that are in the middle, look at effective altruism, look at, you can look at any of these organizations and kind of pick and choose. I don't think any of them are doing it like the right way. I don't think there is the right way. I think it's about having these conversations. And an old boss of mine used to say that sanctuaries were vegan makers. And like, while rescuing and having 300, 400 animals at a sanctuary and then not having enough, that's something that sanctuaries face every day. I used to have to answer the phone and people would say, there's this chicken and I don't know what to do with them. They were my neighbors. They got this chick at Easter and now like they're going to take them to be slaughtered and like this and that and these horrible things. And I'd have to say, we don't have space. And it's just like, it's a really hard thing because of course we want to take in all the animals we can, but then you would get in a situation where some animals would have to be in cages to make room for others. And like the point is rescuing and providing the best home and the best, residence best home for the residents that we have already, those 400 animals. And you can't really what's the word? Let their freedom or their, lives, their wealth, I guess, suffer to make room for others, even though we want to. And it's just like this ugly, again, there's no right way to do it, I think. But I do think that sanctuaries can be vegan makers, or they can like change people's hearts because, while it's only 400 animals maybe who are rescued versus the millions that are still there, people will come and make a connection. They'll say like, oh, this is, Ethan the lamb, or this is Clyde the chicken. And like or the rooster, and I had a connection with him, or, and it's just, it's kind of, it's different when you're looking at, the idea, we've talked a lot about effective altruism in this, which is interesting. Monica brought it up and I'm like, I keep going back to that, but the idea of, I think it's like 5.9 million billion. I'm really bad at numbers. And I don't, the thing is like, if you're looking, that's the whole point I'm trying to make, is that million versus billion, like those numbers are so big that it's so hard to kind of like tell what that means, And so I think it's that many children die of things like malaria and like internal issues and all of that, like all over the world, that are preventable with like clean drinking water and this and that. And it's like, we want to save all of those children, but if there's one child in front of us suffering, we're going to try to save that one child before we donate maybe to save these millions, because it's like something we can point to, like it's not so abstract. And I think that with animal agriculture, it can get really abstract really quickly. And what sanctuaries do is they kind of reel that all in and say, it's not an abstract thing. Like, this is Danny the turkey, and like, this is why you shouldn't eat turkeys because of her, versus these are the millions of turkeys. Yeah, that was kind of also a tangent, but that was a good point, Valerie. So, and everybody, about everything. What a fun conversation. Not very Harry Potter the last like 20 minutes, sorry. So, okay, I have a couple questions, and then we have like 5-10 minutes before we'll start to wrap it up, I think. So Valerie had a question that I don't think we got to last book club, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I was just wondering, given the emphasis on using animals, like, do you think you would like Hogwarts? Like, would you enjoy it? Did we talk about that last month?
Feels like last year. We might have, but I think everyone will have different answers. So
Yeah, if anyone didn't answer that last, I was gonna say semester now, last month, and wants to answer that now, last book club, you can, or I can ask a different question. I just thought it was interesting. I feel like my answer would change every time depending on what the discussion was.
what was the question? Would you enjoy Hogwarts knowing how much animals are used there? Right?
Yeah. Given like the emphasis on using animals like in potions and transfiguration and, just the food and everything, like, would you enjoy it? I think now it's coming back to me. I think we talked about it and I mentioned another fanfic of like Luna telling Snape, like, instead of using like this animal thing, you could use this plant thing, and like the acidity is the same level. And so like, I think there are ways around using animals. So that was my answer.
Yeah, the main thing for me would be like, if you're allowed to opt out of anything, because otherwise I feel like every day in potions class, I would just be crying and it would be awful. And then Snape would probably just like make fun of me forever. So I think that a lot of students would be like afraid to be empathetic just because the teachers are kind of terrible.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think like when we're reading this text as, when we're not reading it through an animal lens or through, a feminist rereading or a framework, when we're just reading it as like a children's book, which is what, how it was written, what it was written for, we can see all the animals and see like, wow, it's so cool that animals are in like every lesson, and there's animals and it's like these cool things and these like squirmy thing. And like, I think also like kids like gross things more than adults, I guess, like worms and dirt and all of that stuff. Monica, the pedagogy at Hogwarts is terrible. Yes. But I think that in the non-magical world, we don't see animals used as much. I mean, there's sometimes science classes have like a fish tank or like rats, or they like hatch chickens or, things like that. And then there's like dissection, but outside of like bio and sciencey stuff, which I guess that's kind of, but no, like we don't have anything like transfiguration. So I just think that there's a lot more animals used in Hogwarts than there are in Muggle schools. And I think that, actually, I don't know what I think about that. I think that it could either make it more, like it would make it less weird, I guess. And people would just be like, yeah, this is the way that it is, animals and creatures and in their parts. Cause it's not always live creatures, as we've seen. It's a lot of times, exploiting the animals. That's just a normal part of life. Or it could be like, hey, this doesn't seem right. So we should do something about it. I don't know which way it would go. Obviously I have one that I would prefer. And then let's see.
Actually, I think like there's probably, along with what like Valerie was saying with like, opting out of classes, there are actually so many classes that don't involve animals, like, but we mostly don't see them because Hermione's the only one that takes them, like arithmancy or ancient runes or Muggle studies. But I mean, also there's like history of magic and like, I feel like as long as you could like opt out or at least not have to participate in the usage of animals in like the core classes, it could totally be possible to like make your existence at Hogwarts completely like animal cruelty free. It would have to be like a very dedicated witch or wizard or, magical being to do that. But like, I think it could happen because I'm getting flashbacks to like when I was at university and had to take like a biology class, and I was like the only person in class that like made the decision to opt out of like doing dissections and everything. But like it was still possible to do that and still like complete the class and everything.
Definitely. Yeah, there are ways to, I know I wrote a paper in like 6th grade. It's probably like one page. At the time it seemed like a lot, but to get out of dissection, because I was like, I'm not doing this, and if they had said I had to, then I would have taken it up with whoever, because like I just wasn't going to do it. And I think that there would be students who would do the same, and just be like this, either because they didn't want to or because it was like icky or whatever, but there would be pushback. And I think that I feel like at least Hermione would see a problem with something like dissection. But then again, we see, using potion ingredients and stuff. But at the same time, a lot of potion ingredients that use like animal names aren't actually animals. They're like plants named certain things. And so when we're reading this as kids or even as adults with very limited knowledge of plant stuff like me, like I see these and I'm like, oh, like, I don't know, something like rat tail is like pretty obvious, but also it might not be, because there are probably plants called like, rat tail, and it's just some kind of like ferny thing or something. So I don't know.
I don't think most people know that though. When you like shared an article with us, and my mind was blown.
I just looked, I was trying to, I was trying to find that thing. I just typed in like potions, ingredients, vegan. Maybe I should like add Harry Potter.
Oh,
but
I totally bookmarked it because we're gonna
did you?
blog.
Okay. Oh, good. Yeah, and it just had to do with like, but also it's cool when you just Google stuff like that, because then it's like somebody asked a question who might have been one of us, but it probably wasn't. And someone said, is there room for vegans in the Harry Potter universe? And like on something from 9 years ago, like this was posted, like people want vegans at Hogwarts. So, and I stand by that. If you go to like AO3, the Archive of Our Own fanfic website, and you type in like vegan under Harry Potter, there's some weird stuff. So but anyway, there's also some stuff where like, again, where Luna is like teaching that you don't have to use animals, or Draco goes to this like vegan restaurant for Valentine's Day, and he like really wants this like vegan feast or whatever. And like people want this outside of just me and my obsession with fanfic. And
there are some good ones. Check it out. Just read like the little descriptions and you'll have a good time.
Yeah.
We'll share them in the Discord.
And I'll make sure like this article that I found too, because people have they're bringing up a lot of stuff about like Neville and his, potions skills or lack thereof. And then like, you don't need to consume animals to make potions, and people are rallying around vegan Harry Potter. So that's cool.
I just wanted to make note of something that Parth brought up in the comments, because I know that's been on the Discord as well, about there's like a weird form of divination that's like called ovomancy, and it's about like cracking open eggs to read the future. And I'm not sure if anyone knows like if this is just like a Harry Potter specific thing, or if like there was some sort of historical.
It's a thing.
Oh, okay. Okay, well, I apologize for calling it weird. I will just say it's not vegan. I'll have to look that up then.
Yeah, I don't think it's in Harry Potter, right? But it's like
it's talked about in Pottermore, but not in the actual materials.
Oh, okay. Like, but does it have like a basis in like history?
Yeah.
Or was that just something that like the author kind of thought of?
No. So ovomancy is a real thing. It was like kind of like an ancient Greek, and then like a little bit like historical Scottish.
Okay. Well, that makes sense then, because it takes place in Scotland. But
yeah. So the word is the Greek version.
Got it.
Yeah. It says here like witchcraft stuff, but it's not like I typed in ovomancy. Well, and here it says mancy, like double O, and it's it looks like it's historical, and there's a little bit in about Harry Potter, but then a lot of it's just like history, I guess, historical. So interesting. And I wonder if it would be like Ashwinder eggs or something specifically in Harry Potter. I don't know. I don't know the Harry Potter side of it all, but I know that those are used a lot. So Protego Foundation, we rely on donations to be able to do what we do. And so please feel free to, and also donations and engagement. So tell all of your friends about us, tell people about book club and Discord and Protego Cast and all of that. Send them to our website. If you'd like to make a donation, feel free. That would be very helpful. A lot of you are already donating and extremely engaged in everything that we do. And we really can't thank you enough, because that's how we're able to keep doing what we're doing. So it's really appreciated, everything. So thank you everyone so much for coming.